In the beginning, the, actually, I was born in northeastern Wisconsin, raised on a dairy farm, and graduated from high school in 1961, and then went off to college. At that time, the Vietnam War was just starting, and the draft was in force, and if you went to college, you were entitled to a what they called a 2S deferment, as long as you stayed in college and didn't graduate. So I stayed in college about 5.5, going on 6 years, avoiding the draft. And then my grandfather died. And Grandpa Charlie was on the Marinette County Draft Board, and 2 weeks later, I got my draft notice. So I shopped around a little bit of what the alternatives were, and decided that I want to go on a track that I could get a commission. So I went through basic training, AIT, and then into infantry OCS. OCS was hard, it was really tough. But I graduated from OCS in May of '66. I got commissioned as a second lieutenant. And here's a photograph of me as a second lieutenant. Really, kind of cocksure of himself, smart ass, and pretty damn young and stupid. But I thought I had the world by the horn, and that was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. After graduating from OCS, because I had so much college, I guess they decided not to put me in a line infantry outfit and assigned me to special operations, and specifically psychological warfare. And so I was assigned to Fort Bragg, North Carolina with the Special Forces guys. We got pretty good extensive training, got language, got approaches to psychological warfare, how to go about doing it. And essentially we're talking about advertising and winning the support, the hearts and minds of the people. Doing a lot of work in the villages, and we did a lot of work from helicopters and what have you. So May '66, I deployed to Vietnam, and I kind of used this map to kind of get an orientation as to where we were at. But North Vietnam up here, I Corps here where the Marines were, 2 Corps here where the My Lai incident actually took place, 3 Corps where I was assigned in the middle, which was basically the surrounds of Saigon going out, all the way out to the Cambodian border and where the Ho Chi Minh Trail entered into Vietnam, and then 4 Corps, which was down in the Mekong Delta. So I was assigned to 2 Corps. We were assigned basically to a battalion, a PSYOP battalion that was headquartered in Bien Hoa, close to Tan Son Nhut Air Base, and then we were sent out as teams to various infantry units and tactical units in the Corps area. So we were widely dispersed. It was a very, informal command arrangement, because my boss was back at Bien Hoa, and I only saw my boss one time. But we're usually working, I was working most times at a division and brigade, so a 1-star or 2-star type headquarters on a we can provide this kind of support to you basis. So it was good. So here's a copy from the Tay Ninh base camp of the mountain we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Nui Ba Din. And it dominated the landscape. The Mekong Delta was basically flat as a pancake. And this volcanic pile of rock just kind of stuck up like a sore thumb. And it made a great navigational guide, and it also made a great communications point. So our efforts, and we were pretty good at psychological warfare. our efforts would center on actual groundwork. I would go out with my interpreter if we got into a firefight and got Charlie pinned down in tunnels or something like that. My interpreter and I would go out and go into the situation and try and talk the guys out of the tunnels. We didn't really like that because a lot of times we had to go down in the tunnel a little ways with a blowhorn, and that got to be really spooky. But you know, you got them kind of trapped down there, we would get people to surrender. We also, I had to coordinate all the messages going out, and any message we put out had to be approved at, actually at the embassy level. And so if we're going to put something new out, and sometimes local commanders would come up with some really bad ideas that we'd have to kill every now and then. So I'd have to do that, so I was always working with division staff and what have you. And we also put a lot of, spread a lot of paper over Vietnam. And we dumped tons of leaflets, and the guys that, the people who we'd get to surrender would often tell us that those leaflets were just wonderful because they made wonderful toilet paper. So, but actually, the campaigns worked fairly well. We were getting 20 to 30 guys surrendering a month. And so I figured, like, when I was working for the division, probably a couple hundred people I was kind of responsible for surrendering. And that always kind of weighed kind of heavy on me. After we pulled out, these guys had zero protection. They, basically were deserters. And either they were killed, or if they were lucky, they might have spent 10 years in a re-education camp or something. So, the propaganda that I was spreading really did a lot of damage to a lot of people, and feel a little bit guilty about that. So let's get back to my mountain. Nui Ba Din kind of always dominated the landscape. And at the very top of it, we had established a radio station, a relay station. At the time, most communications in the Army were line of sight, FM radio, VHF. And this place rising 3,200 some odd feet above the rest of the area of operation, just ideal place to place your antennas. So at the top we had this radio station, usually about 120, 150 odd troops stationed up there for both security and to operate the radios. This is one of my own photographs, actually, of the top, and you could see the outlying flatness of the area. So we owned the top. We had the top and had a security and radio, but constantly being harassed by the Viet Cong. The middle of the station, and these are contemporary pictures, so that's not the way things look right now, but at the very base of the mountain in Tay Ninh City was the Cao Dai Temple. And the Cao Dai religion is a very eclectic religion that draws from Christianity, Hebrew, Muslims, Hebrew, the whole pantheon, Buddhist, Confucius, and their final deity is actually Victor Hugo. But the monks are very sociable. A number of times I had tea with the monks at the temple. You had to leave your weapons at the guardhouse, and I know at least one time I had tea with an NBA lieutenant in the temple. About 3/4 of the way up the mountain is Loch Lin, Trung Loch Lin Pagoda. I mispronounced that terribly, but anyway, beautiful pagoda. It didn't look quite this beautiful when we were there, kind of shabbily maintained. But also on the mountain were a tremendous amount of tombs and tunnels and what have you in the mountains. So basically, Charlie and Viet Cong owned the middle and the base. We had the top. And needless to say, it sets up a bit of conflict. This is what I looked like at the 25th Division back in 1978. So you kind of get an idea. I think I was a little bit younger then. But in May of '68, the Viet Cong attacked the radio station at the top of Nui Ba Dinh and overran it. They got into the wire and overran it. They finally were driven out by U.S. forces, but primarily with artillery and rocket gunships, by calling fire on their own positions, which is one of the most dangerous things you can do as a combat soldier. In other words, you get down in your hole and you bring the artillery right down on your head. There were 25 U.S. casualties and a number of U.S. wounded as a result of that operation. I don't know how many Vietnamese were killed in the operation, but probably a considerable number. So as a result of that, in January, the 1st Brigade of the 25th got the mission to clear the mountain, to do a search and destroy operation on the mountain. And they went in with a full infantry battalion, an armor battalion, and a better part of a ranger company. And they literally went from temple to tomb to holes and caves and cleared the mountain of all the VC. The problem with that, the VC being insurgents and doing what insurgents do, when they saw this big mess of U.S. troopers coming up the mountain, they just melted away. And they mostly got out of the way, so there was not a lot of casualties on their part. It was awfully hard work for the U.S. soldiers in it. And so and immediately, as soon as the battalions and the armor went away, and the radio station up on top was again on its own, the VC came back and reoccupied their tunnels and caves and what have you, and started sniping and annoying, probing the radio station. Well, this really annoyed. Colonel Fair was in charge of the brigade at the time, and he got promoted to brigadier general as assistant division commander. And so he started putting together an operation of what he wanted to do is to use Chinook helicopters to haul in bladders of fuel, hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel, MoGas, diesel, anything else he could get his hands on, up to that radio station, and then they're going to basically drain the bladders, evacuate all the troops from the top of the mountain, and then try and burn the mountain down, drain all that fuel down, and try and burn Nui Ba Dinh. So that was that was getting into the planning stages in April, just a few weeks before I was getting ready to catch the Freedom Bird and come back home to the States. I heard about the operation and sat in on some briefings and expressed some reservations, to say the least, because this was going to be extremely counterproductive. It's going to really turn the Cowdai population against any government forces. And and I informed the General Fair that this has got to be approved by the MACV and the embassy. And I got a lot of grumbling. They did not like but I didn't get a specific, I don't think I got a specific order, but I was kind of told not to let anybody know. But I did get the my contact at the embassy on the phone later and told them what was coming off. About the next day, I was out on a operation where we had some soldiers pinned down and trying to talk them out of holes. I was away from the division base camp. But when I got back, the G5 told me, hey, a helicopter from the embassy came up here. And a guy in civilian clothing got out, got a hold of General Fair, had a one-way conversation with him, and got back in his helicopter and left. And about a half an hour later, the whole operation to burn Nui Ba-Din was totally canceled, scrubbed. So I think it had something to do with that phone call. Anyway, so 2006, I go back to Vietnam, revisit the sites around Cu Chi and stuff. And the countryside of Vietnam just looks the same as it did then. And I don't have a shot of Saigon, I probably should, but Saigon looked the same as it was there, with lots of scooters and people on bikes and wonderful people and great smells. The tunnels that we were looking at trying to talk people out of now have become kind of a tourist attraction. It's called Tunnels of Cu Chi. If you get to Vietnam, do go out there and see how amazingly complex and deep those tunnels run. We never got past the surface, really, and the complex was built by the Viet Minh and constantly improved. It was a main communications line from Cambodia down to Saigon. But you, as a tourist, you can go into the tunnels. Well, I went down in the tunnels, and I think I lasted less than 4.5 minutes. Kind of got very, very, very uncomfortable and had to get out of there. Even though they made the tunnels bigger than they were when we were originally there. So, but also they're using Nui Ba-Din now as kind of a tourist attraction. They got trams going up it, and a lot of people use it. It's becoming loved to death by the Vietnamese, I think. So you got water slides and trams going up, and then hiking trails going all the way to the top. It's got a good chance of becoming the Wisconsin Dells of Vietnam. I sincerely hope not, but it has recovered, and thank God we didn't burn it. So. And, you know, again, lots of young people using the mountain and going up on the mountain and hiking and taking the trams and the Pagoga has been.
We can just go back to
the Pagoga. I can't say it. Anyway, the temple has been restored, as you saw in that picture that I showed earlier. But, you know, for my service in Vietnam, I was awarded the Bronze Star, and I never really thought much of it. The citation was kind of filled with Bravo Sierra, and really said almost nothing about what I did. And I kind of, after researching and thinking back through my memories in the campaigns, I decided that I'd never taken this thing out of the box, and I decided that I'm just going to award myself the Bronze Star for saving Nui Ba-Din. So in doing this story, I would like to thank, now that I think about it, my interpreter, Nguyen Thu, and I have no idea where he is or if he survived the war. And also want to thank you for listening to this story. And I thank you for the opportunity putting this together, because it has, like you say, brought value to me about my tour in Vietnam. Thank you.